We're getting towards the end of the season. It's middle of December right now. In fact, Dylan's starting his first client trip of the year. We always start our season. This is what we refer to our season starting in December. Tomorrow, right, Dylan?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
Happy to get back into it. Kind of looking forward to doing some cruising while the sun is still hot.
Yeah, Southwest Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And then I start mine next Tuesday. I'll be out of Eau Claire. So up in that area, and then over into Minnesota. I think my last one is on December 23rd, and I'll be all the way over about 2 hours west into Minnesota, and I'll be out of the house at that point. So, but anyways, it's that time of year. In fact, yesterday we're starting to get into the doe management. My son-in-law Joe shot a nice 8-point, and actually his biggest buck, he's from the UP of Michigan, came down with my daughter and grandson Carson. So really cool. But I sat right with him, and we had doe permits, both of us, and there's a doe that came in, and he wants a couple deer. And so I said, you can shoot them. We had 2 muzzle loaders. They're both loaded and reloads. And he's like, man, I'm still shaking too bad. It was 8 minutes after he shot his buck, and so I shot her. And so it was a pretty cool night to have a double with a doe and a buck last night. But we still have some doe management to do in both states. But outside of that, we're really winding our hunt down. And you really start thinking about what you could have done different. And I think that, we do as a group, we go out and design whitetail parcels. I've been doing that. This is actually my 21st season this year, designing whitetail parcels, believe it or not, going into 2025. So 21st season doing this. When I started last year, it was over 1,600 parcels. So I'm getting close to 1,700, but we'll say it's over 1,600 parcels that I've been to, 26 states. When you add Dylan's experience in there too, I know combined we've been to at least 35 different whitetail states, because Dylan's hit a lot of southern ones I haven't hit. I've even been down to Mississippi, but and kind of all these corners. But we've covered a lot of whitetail states, just the 2 of us, let alone Kevin, Joe, and now Wes. Wes is his second year going to client parcels too. We look at all these different types of parcels. Hunting experience is one thing. Because I've hunted big woods in the UP of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, lots of different ag land in between, public and private land. It gives you a perspective of every different type of habitat and parcel that you hunt, and that's invaluable because we're designing hunting parcels. If we don't have that hunting experience, then our recommendations are no good. If you don't have that hunting background, public-private land is no good. So we've developed a set of concepts, or I have, that I've written about, and we try to infuse those into everything. We still try to hunt that. A couple weeks ago, we're in Pennsylvania, shot another nice public land buck out there. I think it was public land buck, I think it's number 18 in 22 seasons, somewhere around there since 93. Public land bucks in Ohio, Michigan as well, throughout the year. So a lot of public land bucks. And when you hunt big woods and you hunt swamps, it's a totally different background and level of experience that you can add. And all these different little experiences, from big woods to private land to big ag to medium ag to small woodlots and big woods and everything in between, you learn things about whitetails that you look at and say, wow, I see that in big woods, and that correlates with big ag because of this. And you find that whitetails are the same everywhere. There's a set of balances that you need to apply. You need more food on one type of parcel, more woods on another. So when it comes to small parcels, I read something on a comment and it said, small parcels. It was on an old small parcel video that we did. And they said, just put a food plot on it, make it thick cover, and let it set back. Let it set. That's all you have to do. I made the comment, that's one of many ways to look at it. And I think that's what happens. If your experience is only in a certain state, surrounded by this type of habitat, and that's all you've ever known and done, that's all you've ever hunted, very, very, very limited experience. You need to have that level of diversity of not only hunting background, but looking at all these different parcels, because let's face it, every parcel we go to, you learn something. And so when you're learning something on every parcel, and all these parcels are different, we're basically interviewing the client, and it's helping us learn. It's helping us learn about them. And when we interview them, we know what their successes and failures are of this property in a snapshot within an hour and a half. They tell us. And we can ask questions. Well, how'd this work? And we start to see this pattern. Like, you planted a half acre of brassica in northern Wisconsin, and it was demolished to the dirt by September 15th. It doesn't mean that you had too many deer. It means you didn't have enough food, and it means Nebraskas are susceptible to overbrowsing in a northern setting, and you see that. That same situation in big ag, a half-acre brassica in northern Ohio, maybe the deer didn't touch it till March. Maybe it rotted in the spring. Why? So you start to see those balances from one to the other, and if you don't have experience in one area, then you don't understand why something works or doesn't in another area. So when it comes to small parcel designs, I'm going to go through some basics and let you interpret and try to pigeonhole and try to get, like, you know, it's almost like a pinball machine. It's like you have in a pinball machine, you have all these blockers and paddles and everything, you know, into here. And it's, you drop a ball in here and it hits here, comes over here, and all of a sudden it ends up here. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're giving that advice so that you can kind of hone in on what you think is best for your own. I'm sorry when I go through those, there's so many different ways to look at it. It's not just do this and this is what'll work. It's look at all these parameters and try to figure out what works best for you. I'm sorry if this feels long-winded, but what I'm trying to do is explain the background of what you need to look at parcels in the first place and be competent to make advice for someone to look at parcels. And at the same time, how much information you need to glean from this so you don't have to hire us. You know, our schedules get full. Dylan, I think you said you had about 10 spots
something like that. I'd have to look again, but yeah, we're getting.
And are you still going to the normal 60, 70 days?
Yeah, I was going to try and cap it at 60. Now I think there's 64 around there.
So and you're still going to add 10 more?
There's probably going to be a few more.
And I'm right around Dylan. I've been to as many as 125 in 1 year. And Dylan, you haven't been to 125.
No, I think
maybe you've been to
80
some though.
80 some, and I'm
yeah.
Like, all right, I got.
So can you imagine the 120 some?
Oh my gosh, I could not. And then he gets on here and talks about deer more. I don't understand it. Like,
yeah, it's nonstop. So you can imagine when I go out to eat and someone approaches me about deer, I kind of like shy away. Someone even last night, so, well, what's your number? I'm going to send you this video. You don't watch videos? You didn't see this big buck being shot? He's like, you're kidding me. I'm like, no, I don't watch this stuff. I don't have time. You know, it's kind of, I really don't. And so as I'm going out, the owner of where we're picking up pizza is saying, just leave him alone. He doesn't want to give you his number. And this drunk guy is, you know, give me your number. And he's like, well, I'll get it from so-and-so, a friend of mine. And I'm like, yeah, you get it from Jim. Because I know Jim's not going to give it to him. So anyways, it's kind of like 10 minutes later, we walk out for a half minute and you're trying to be polite. But regardless, I do like talking about deer, but sometimes you need a break. So I'm going to go through these parameters, try to pinball it down for what you need. And I'll go through them quick. Because all of these you can look up. If you look up certain things on big ag parcel design, whitetail habitat solutions, you'll find where we talk about best habitat, best parcel design. We have playlists you can look up to, so you can find all this information. I'm going to start out with big ag. Big ag's different because typically when you have big ag, I'm looking at northern Ohio, areas in Illinois, areas in southern Wisconsin, northern Indiana versus southern Indiana, portions of PA. PA, you get some hills, it's a little bit different. Where you have hills, then you can't ag everything, so then you end up with woods. That's why around here, we can't ag the steep sides, the steep bottoms, and the steep tops. You're left with a 50%, and that's more the mid, number 2. Big ag, though, you have limited amounts of cover. So think about it. Think about things in reverse. Like if you have a 10-acre parcel and you put 9 acres of food on that parcel in big ag, well, where are the deer going to live? You took out the 10 acres. Maybe that was part of 15 acres, and you took out 9 of it. So you have 6 acres left in the whole section for deer to live in. Maybe a few ditches and drainages and a small woods behind someone's house. So you need to really have thick cover. And what I find is when you have small parcels, small wooded parcels, 10 acres, 5 acres, 20. Dylan had one that was 8 last year. It's funny, one of my smallest ones been 8. And so
it was fun. It was a blast. Yeah, that was a great time.
You know what you find too? I find that you've put just as much work into an 8-acre parcel because you're compartmentalizing.
Oh, it's like every tree matters on 8.
It does.
We're going to hinge this. We're going to get rid of this one. We're going to bring this food plot to right here, you know.
Yeah, to this point.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's different. It's not that kind of strategy is not important on a big parcel, but what's different on a small parcel is that when you have small parcels like this in big ag, then deer are used to being compartmentalized. We talk about bedding, and this is one of the balances. So a big mature buck that's bedding out in a swamp in northern Minnesota, upstate New York, they don't want to only be able to see 10 feet in front of them, because they could have XYZ predator jump on them at any time. They want to see those approaching predators. There's a predation factor. And we see that. It's just something when you have that experience and you see all these different parcels, predation matters, and being able to see matters to a deer. However, when you get into ag land and it's big ag and you have small pockets of cover, you could literally put that same mature buck into a pickup bed size location where he wants to spend his daytime hours and he can't see out of that. He's fine. If there's some dogs coming, they're different than coyotes and bobcats and cougars and even a bear. Those dogs come and make a lot of noise, yip, move. They might even have a collar on, but that's their predators in a lot of those areas. So they're happy being compartmentalized. That means, and I've seen Thumb Area, Michigan. I started learning these things in the 80s because I'd hunt a 5-acre swale that had 2 acres of cover in the middle with a little bit of field edge, and then a fence row on each side and a house on the other side. So literally I'm hunting like 3 acres. And I'd watch 26 deer pour out of that because they had a lack of cover. This is on the corner of Argyle Road and Decker Road. A lot of you will know where that's at. And it's a cover behind a house on the west side of that house in that corner there. And literally 20 some deer. I don't even know if there's woods there now. But they would pour out of there because in that section there might have been 60, 70 acres of cover at the most. We had a 5-acre woods, a 10-acre woods, skinny strip on the river bottom, this little woods right there, and the fence rows. And that was it. So deer would pour out of those, and they're used to that. So when you're thinking about management, you can make it too thick, because obviously if a buck can't move his antlers through there, if he can't crawl through there, if he can't fit his antlers through there. And I've seen those areas, southern Michigan. Their parcel was so thick because they made so many hinge cuts. We had to go and open them up. But they made the comment where you get a 2 to 3 year old buck, he couldn't make it through there with his rack size. 18 inches wide, 17 inches wide is too thick. Does and fawns would burrow their way in there. So you still have to have enough room for bucks, deer in general to move through. They don't like to dive over something to crawl under something at the same time. They want to see what's on the next side. They want to be able to, if they have to jump over something, they want to see where they're landing. They don't have to jump over and then dive and duck. So, if we can move through it fairly easy, then it's okay. But compartmentalization, that has to do with how thick the habitat is, the diversity of habitat, a mix of hardwoods, hardwood regen, shrub growth, briar growth, sumac, upland growth, conifers, and all of those combined is a perfect combination. The more diversity you have in that parcel, the better. And if you can see through it 20 yards, and that's about it. Summertime, you have a hard time seeing past 5-10 yards, but you still have trails crisscrossing through. That's awesome. In a big ag parcel like that, having a little food plot, and this depends on, your neighbors. What kind of food sources are around you? If there's no food for a mile in every direction once the fields are plowed, then you need to think about an acre of food off to one side. But you don't want to spread that acreage through the middle of that cover. It's got to be off to the side, one side, very, very critical, because you're not dealing with a lot of depth. Depth of cover is you take that 10-acre block of woods and you put a food plot of an acre right in the middle. Now you have very little depth to hold deer in any direction, and they want separation. Does and fawns, young bucks, old bucks, they want to layer, and you just don't have enough room for them to layer until they're off the property. So that food needs to be to one side, however it is. But an acre's a lot in a case like that. However, in an area that's food rich, standing crops, unplowed fields in November, December, where they can go out at night and they have lots of food. Maybe it's average food. Like around here, we have alfalfa still. And it's frozen out, frosted out, a third the nutritional value, attraction volume, but it's everywhere. And there's no snow right now. So there's a lot of volume. It's like standing hay bales everywhere. They can just go eat. And so that's their nighttime food source. It's safe, it's social, it's out and so there's a lot of food. So when you have a lack of cover, make it very thick. Use just enough food that you need to hold a deer herd. If you have an acre of food and it's all standing in March, you need to cut it way back and replace that with cover. You can rim it with switchgrass, make it extremely thick so the deer feel compartmentalized. They don't mind when they're eating. They don't like quarter acre grid patterns, where you have a quarter acre of food and you make it into 10 compartments of miscanthus grass or switchgrass in these little pockets. Big bucks will avoid that. To a certain extent, they want to feed and be able to see. And if you look in these areas, how many times you drive by and you look back in a cornfield and there's 20 deer and you have big bucks, young bucks, does, fawns. They're all in the same spot. So you don't need to have compartmentalization in your food plot to spread deer around. You just need something hidden. And the hidden comes in with being really screened around. So you might use food to direct traffic, a lot of long linear scrape trails. I've had clients on that 8 acres, for example. They had a scrape trail that was clover on the outside with some scrapes hanging to set up stand locations on either side. They would literally go 10 yards in off a dirt road, blow their scent towards a dirt road, sit on the corner of that scrape trail, bedding all on the inside, neighborhood on the back side. Perfect scenario. Golf course across the street. Perfect setup to shoot whatever mature buck was in the area, because you eventually come into that scrape trail. Their scent is managed. They're not putting that food in the middle, and they're providing that cover that was lacking in the area. When you get into mid-ag, this is a little bit different, because this is where food starts to matter more and more. As the cover increases in the area, big woods, food matters more than mid-ag. Mid-ag, your food plots and your food source management matters more than the big ag. So when you get into mid-ag, we're looking at that balance where you could have 6 acres of food for 200 acres, 120 acres. Where if you had big ag, you're only going to have 10 acres. You might have a quarter acre of food. You can't look at something per acre. That's people that only have experience in one area, and you're saying, well, we need 5 acres of food for every 40 acres, or 5 acres of food for every 200 acres. When you hear that kind of stuff, just throw it out the window. Throw out all their other advice too, because that means you don't have the experience to know that you need that balance of food, less in big ag, more in big woods, because food is lacking. You need more cover where they need cover. You need more food where they need food. So mid-ag, you're looking at, it could be 6 acres per 200. It could be in Coon Valley, where we hunt there. We have about 3¼ acres of food, and there's about 40 acres there, and 30 acres of cover, and then a bunch of grass and some switchgrass. We have, unfortunately, a huge deer population there, and we can only handle so much. In that, if the neighbors don't shoot a lot of deer, then we're kind of at their mercy. In that situation, our food gets pounded, but that food lasts till about January, February. Kind of go by that. If you have food, a lot of food that's rotting in March, April, then you need to rethink how much food you have and convert it more to cover. So we're looking at mid-ag. We're looking at more holding plots, where you have an acre to 2 acre food plot, and then some satellite hunting plots that bring deer through them to get to there. Those are great bow stands. Might have a water hole. We're actually developing those lines of movement, and that's more like what we're at here in Minnesota, where we have that holding plot, some small satellite food plots off to the side, 1/4 acre or less, 1/10 of an acre. A lot of times we're planting those in clover, and then we're offering a diversity blend in the holding plot, where we expect to hold deer till dark and then send them on to a safe spot after that. And it could be your safe spots to your neighbors that overpressures their food sources during the day and spooks them all. And so they're feeding on your neighbor's food at night, which is ideal, whether it's neighbor's ag or neighbors that poorly manage their property. When you get into big woods, this is where, again, mid-ag, you're looking at deer want to see 20, 30, 40, 50 feet in every direction. Big ag, they want to see 5 feet's okay. And when you get into big woods, they might want to see 40 yards. So you got to think a lot bigger. And that's why it's really hard. But you get into big woods, and we'll talk about size of neighbors. We can throw all this all out the window. But if you're surrounded by all public and it's unpressured, then maybe that 10 acres, you need to have half of that in food, because food is lacking in an area like that, where that same situation in big ag with 10 acres, you might have need 1/4 acre of food. And that's why you can't say that you need this amount of food for every parcel. Big woods, you're lacking food, and you can't compartmentalize the cover. Deer want to see a lot further, especially in their bedding areas, meaning 20, 30 yards is a good rule. They want to see when something's coming. Really important to not try to fit them into a pickup truck. If you're making a lot of hinge cuts, that could be a very bad thing, because the hinge cuts are often, because it's too thick, they'll avoid an entire area. You can knock down a bunch of timber in an area, have 5 or 6 trails going through it, and it could be too thick because they can't see out of it, or they can get trapped in a trail where they can't get out, and they have predators on both ends, and they're literally trapped to death. So big woods, think about that. Bigger holding plots, satellite plots. You might have a ½ acre. Think bigger food. You're expanding that out, so to the point where your holding plots might be 2 acres plus. And if you can't have those, you can't have those. But the point is, you need a lot of food. I'll go to a 40-acre property in big woods in northern Wisconsin, and if they can put 3 to 5 acres in there and have an acre here, 2 acres there, another 2 acres there, and a couple little, or 3 or 4 little food plots going through those, you're still trying to maximize cover. And a lot of times, I'm putting the food on the opposite side of where I expect deer to be at during the day. So if they're on big public land to the north, let's say, I'm going to try to concentrate that food more to the southeast, southwest corners, and south, so that I can draw the deer through my land from the public land. Because if you put all that food to the north right next to the public land, those deer don't even need to step on your property. They just come to the food, that's their daily movement, and then they go back on the public land. And where a buck will bed from his food source might be 600-700 yards, 800 yards from that food source. Where in big ag, and you have a lack of cover, he might be 100 yards away from his food source, and that's acceptable to him. Again, compartmentalization, where on that big woods, small acre piece, he might bed a ½ mile away. And that's what's different too when you have public down here. I'll talk about that. So think about those balances. They're going to bed a lot further away on big ag, or on big woods. They're going to bed a lot closer to that food source on big ag. You need to work on your cover a lot more. Like when we worked on the UP of Michigan property, cover was the least of our concerns. We didn't really work on cover too much throughout the years. We did a little bit here and there, more for experimentation. We actually had to open up conifer boughs and islands so the deer can actually use them, because it was too thick. So we actually took away cover, if that makes sense, so deer could actually see and use little islands of cover surrounded by tag alder. Otherwise, it was just good for some snowshoe hares, and that was it. It was literally too thick, so we had to remove lower conifer boughs so they would actually use that. But it was food up in that area. When you get into the size of the neighbors, this really has a lot to do with it, where they're positioned. If I have a lot of small parcels around me and I'm in a big wooded area, then yeah, you need some food. But when the going gets rough and there's a lot of people in the woods, your cover is going to help, and cover is going to keep those deer in, but you can't, again, make it too thick. They still have the same predation factor. So in that case, your food has to be away from your high pressure neighbor. You can't have it right on the edge of it, or don't expect those deer to utilize that food plot. I'd rather have an opposite side so that your morning hunting is more near your pressured neighbor, and you get around, and then your access side is where your food's at, and you just have to be able to get around that food, whether it's an acre, ½ acre, whatever you have. You always have to consider how many neighbors and what size parcel they are, which dictates how many hunters there are around you and how many hunters are using that area. So size of the neighbors has a lot. If I have big, giant neighborhood parcels and I'm in a big woods area, then I know I could use a lot of food on my parcel that's 10 acres, 20 acres, 5 acres, draw a lot of deer in. And those big parcel neighbors probably don't have a lot of hunting pressure, and I can still hunt on those outside edges. And that's where you get into the public land. The public land, and again, I'm just going to talk about a few points about these last few right here. Public land, though, imagine a 10-acre piece surrounded by thousands of acres of public land, and I've seen these, even a mile-long driveway to get back there, and you're the only one with the key. You can make all the cover you want. It doesn't matter. Deer can move anywhere. Low hunting pressure. In fact, they might not even see a deer within a mile of your land, maybe in a mile and a half or more. And so you need food, because that's going to draw deer. And you can have 5-6 acres of food on a parcel like that, and you'll draw deer in from every area. And the cool thing is you can circle way out, which I did when we had acreage in the UP. We could circle way out on the public land and come into the back of the private. We're hunting a quarter mile away from a food plot, and we're getting in that morning movement of deer going back to their bedding areas. Or we're getting into that side movement of them leaving their bedding and traveling a quarter mile still to get to that food source. or we're coming in a different road, driving 7 miles, walking in 45 minutes, and getting 2 miles north of that parcel and shooting a big buck that comes into our lap at 10 o'clock in the morning, those hitting those food plots and food sources to the south in the middle of the night on other people's land or on bait piles. And so think about that if you have that small parcel and you're surrounded by a lot of untouched wilderness, even if it's private or public, then you could have that food source. And then if you can get around and hunt, try to find those knolls, those pinch points, those areas where you can expect deer to come back and bed, especially those mature bucks, because those does will probably be still within a couple hundred yards of that food source, but that buck might be a half mile away. Think about those areas you can get around, wait for him to come back in the morning. And then because you're not disturbing anything in between, you can circle back and hunt that food source in the afternoon, evening, 2 different stand locations, afternoon food and then morning bed. So a little bit different when you're surrounded by public land. I like that public land. And at the same time, if you don't have a lot of neighbors and a lot of hunting pressure and probably likely a lot of small parcels, then you could develop a lot of food on that parcel, a big percentage of it, and expect that food source to be the food source for a mile to 2 miles in any direction or more. Now, when you have a cabin and a home, you can really help things. I've seen cabin in the middle of 10 acres when you have big ag, and you can just simply go out your door, hunt 100 yards over here and shoot the monster buck in the entire area because he's moving around your house like a big bubble, but he doesn't mind the house there. But when you do that in a northern setting in big woods and you put that cabin right in the middle, you still could put a food source out there, but you're really hoping in that situation that you can cut around on public land and hunt way away, because that cabin is going to have an effect. The cabin is something that if you have a house and is there all the time, deer will get used to it a little bit and they'll live in closer proximity to that house, a mature buck. But if that cabin is such, you come up and turn a generator on 6 times a year, then you're gonna have a lot more intrusion with something like that, even though you don't use it very often because the deer aren't used to it. So they'll get used to it to a certain point, but they still stay outside of that bubble. That bubble might be a lot greater if you're in a wilderness setting and you only use a cabin a few times a year and turn on a loud generator and you come up in the morning before, or the afternoon, evening before opening day of gun, you'd expect those deer to be really wise to that. So again, we talked about a lot of different factors here. I hope you can take something back to your own small parcel, but I don't like talking about specific designs on a parcel because that pigeonholes you into thinking you have to assign this design onto your parcel. Instead, think about the concepts at work and those patterns. Try to absorb them, understand them. Maybe leave some comments below and we can discuss it. But I want you to be able to look at this and know there's a lot more that goes into it than just planting a food plot, putting some thick cover around it, throw a couple stands for different winds, and go enjoy the hunt. There's a lot more that goes into it. And no, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I'm trying to make it so you don't have to hire us. If you want to learn all this information, you don't want to hire us, that's fine. We have a lot of people that do, and we get really busy. Part of this too is we have the small parcel design web class. That was a web class I came out with in 2020. It's been wildly successful. We have a lot of videos and a lot of hours in there. And what it does with a workbook is it brings you through the entire process of how you should look at your parcel, parallel access, depth of cover, establishing patterns of use, managing your hunting pressure, and really helps you dissect these in a lot more detail. I forget how many hours of footage it is in there for the total class, but many hours of footage, and you can really look at these in a lot more detail. But you can understand them as it takes you through the day that we spend with a client, starting with morning time and coffee, interviewing them and discussing the things that we do at that time. We'll take you through that discussion and the steps that we take to design your property. And it's a whole heck of a lot more affordable than hiring us and coming out. And we have that web class. We have food plot design web class. You get a great deal if you buy more at one time.
I'm gonna butt in. The other cool thing is how you have like the Facebook group. So it's super cool to see guys that have taken the web class that then go to the Facebook group and then they post their design on there, and then the discussion that takes place below in the comments on their design is awesome. Like it's super cool to see like the collaboration between, you know, sometimes we'll hop on there or other people will hop on there and be like, well, what if you thought about it this way?
Yeah, and that's it's pretty nice because Dylan will be on there. Jen's on there sometimes. I get on there occasionally, And but there's a lot of discussion with the same people that have done this and looked at this stuff for a long time. So there's some really good input on there, and so that is a valuable resource within that. And I hope you like this. You know, we have a lot of tools and free information to help you. You don't ever have to hire us, don't have to buy a web class, but they are there and they're very helpful. And people look at that as an alternative to actually paying thousands of dollars for us to come to your property for the day. So for a few $100s, you can look at this web class. And it's surprising. I'll have clients, Dylan, you've probably seen this too. They have a drawing design and they want to show us. And I always say, just wait till the end.
Wait till the end. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't want it to cloud my thoughts. And it's amazing on those when they're excited to show us. They're probably 80%.
Yeah. A lot of times they're diehard followers. They understand the concepts. They've watched videos like this, and they've put together this in their head already, and then you just bring them that last little bit.
Right.
You know, a lot of times it's on the hunt. You know, it's stand design, access, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
First, but like the overall design, a lot of times is almost there.
And those concepts matter because we're the only ones, and I developed these concepts a long time ago. That's my first book that came out in 2012, Whitetail Success by Design. And those concepts are critical because they can apply anywhere. Anywhere a whitetail roams, they're appropriate for, and those concepts can be fit to that. It's just understanding the balances. So once you know the concepts, depth of cover, paralleling habitat features, perpendicular access, could go on and on, the bedding, layering, all that. Once you understand that, then you can apply that system anywhere a whitetail roams. You know what's interesting about that first 2012 book? The intro and conclusion was based on a public land hunt that I had, I believe, in 2011. So it's pretty interesting when you look at that, where these concepts don't just apply to private land, they apply just like when we go to public land and hunt. Same set of concepts. You can actually look at it and apply those balances anywhere a whitetail roams. And that's why I can, you know, Dylan's been a part of this for years. Literally, we're starting your 10th year. You started in 2016, so then 2015 would be...
Wild, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's really getting into that crazy. But so Dylan's filmed probably 1,400 videos, somewhere around there, all the web classes and so much more. And then Wes works with us every day. Kevin was a student of this for years when he was in Major League Baseball. He got bored at times going through COVID. And so he studied every parcel design for about times 200. Joe was someone who hired me a long time ago. He had his own YouTube channel already, and he was already into it, and he has absorbed this everything. In fact, Joe was one of the first people I thought of. Hey, we could have independent contractors who go out to parcels, design parcels. Joe was one of the first ones I even thought of because he was so into it. And so that's where you take those concepts, those guys absorb them and apply them, and they can apply them accurately. And if you spend enough time doing this, and that web class is a big step. Even the 2012 book, I mean, buy a book for $30 instead of a web class for $500, let alone hiring us from $3,000 to $4,000, whatever it might be. So again, we try to offer a lot of tools to help you out. I hope some of these parameters helped you out and can pinball you into a good corner on your land that's appropriate and helps you in this coming year turn your hunt around for 2025 and beyond.